J.K. Rowling is here. If you do not know who she is, let me tell you. 2 decades ago, she sat on a delayed train when the image of a scrawny, black-haired, bespectacled boy who did not know he was a wizard came to her. Her vision soon captured the imaginations of readers around the world, and it began an unprecedented cultural phenomenon. Time magazine has credited Harry Potter series with creating a fictional universe so detailed and believable that an entire generation has pretty much chosen to live there. It is the best-selling book series in history, with more than 450 million copies sold in 67 languages. 8 movies have also been spawned, and they have grossed $7.7 billion worldwide. Now, 5 years after laying Harry Potter to rest, she has written her first book for adults. It is called The Casual Vacancy. I am pleased to have J.K. Rowling at this table for the first time. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
We've been waiting for you.
Oh, really? Good.
Yes, for a long
That's nice to hear.
How much trepidation did you have after you decided to put Harry to bed in deciding what you wanted to do and how to do what you inevitably wanted to do, is write another book?
That's a good question, because I had the idea for The Casual Vacancy right after finishing Deathly Hallows. You know, so I was actually promoting Deathly Hallows in the States, and I had the idea in the States while on a plane.
Right.
And
on a plane is crucial.
On a plane is crucial, because
so one
clearly
comes on a train and
one's on a train,
plane.
one's on a plane. So you need to keep me moving, and then I get my ideas. There's always trepidation. I mean, I think that people might be surprised to know that I felt trepidation every time I produced a Potter book. You know, the weight of expectation there was, I won't say crushing, it was extraordinary and wonderful to have that weight of expectation.
You were
but
competing
at times,
with yourself.
Yeah, and with the expectations, latterly, of millions of fans, all of whom were very invested in the story and wanted to see what they wanted to see. And I knew where I was going, and I had to put on mental blinkers a lot and just think, I know where I'm going, I must not be influenced by this. So, in a sense, it was liberating to leave that weight of expectation behind and know that I could just do what I wanted to do. It was very freeing. But I must say that I spent the first 2 years working on The Casual Vacancy telling myself, you don't even have to publish that, and you don't even have to publish this book. And that was a way of bringing down my own awareness that, you know, people, it wasn't going to be what some people wanted it to be. You know, because as we both know, I could have kept writing Harry Potters forever, pretty much.
And why didn't you?
Because I always envisaged it as a 7-book series. I had enough plot for 7 books, and when I always knew I would stop at 7. And I'm not going to lie, it was heartbreaking in many ways, because Harry was with me through a very turbulent period in my life, and it was always a place that I could go. You talk about readers always being able to go there. It was a place I was able to go, and to close the door it was like a death. But I knew that it was time to go, and I've not regretted it. I think it was definitely time. He meant
what to you other than all the obvious things, fame, wealth, and all that?
Yeah, it changed my life. That, you know, the most obvious thing, clearly, it utterly changed my life. It transformed my life situation. We were in a precarious, my daughter and I were in a precarious situation when, for a few years. But beyond that, it connects me. Harry connected me to... it's just been the through line through so much of my life. Yeah. And so when I look back at the books, I can remember where I was when I wrote all these 17 years I spent with those characters, 17 years.
But do you talk to them in some real sense? I mean, do you think...
one that I miss the most, beyond any character, is Dumbledore. And he was a strange character, because I always say I feel like I wrote him from somewhere in the back of my brain. He would often say things I didn't know I believed, but once I saw that Dumbledore had said them, oh yeah, that's right, that's true. So he was an interesting character, and I miss him. If I could talk to any of them, it would be Dumbledore.
This mirror gives us neither knowledge or truth. Men have wasted away in front of it, even gone mad. That is why tomorrow it will be moved to a new home. And I must ask you not to go looking for it again. It does not do to dwell on dreams, Harry, and forget to live.
So you set out to write this new book. You knew it was going to be about adults. Mm-hmm. What else did you know after you had that inspiration on that plane?
Well, the germ of the idea was a council election, a local council election, that would be subverted by teenagers, which was a device to expose certain secrets. Yeah, that was the basic idea, and I was excited by that idea because it was going to give me an opportunity to explore a lot of things that are important to me and things that obsess me, frankly.
Like?
And, well, for example, I've just talked about the fact that I was in a very precarious situation. For a few years I was probably as poor as you can go without being homeless in the UK, which is not to say that friends and family didn't help me, because they did, but, you know, it was tough. And
you were writing a book and had to depend on the government.
Well, yeah, I did, although I was working part-time. The law at that time was you could earn up to a very small amount a week without forfeiting housing benefit, which was the thing that was keeping us homed. So I worked up to that amount. I had a clerical job in a church at one point. So and then I was teaching, but we were still existing partly on benefits. I couldn't wholly support us. And then the miracle happened. Harry was published, and we really didn't look back. After a few months, it changed my life. But that period of my life was a formative experience for me, and it shaped my worldview, and it always will shape my worldview. The experience of having been part of a mass of people who are very voiceless, the experience of being scapegoated and stigmatised, because that was the political climate at that time, really has coloured my worldview ever since, and I don't think I'll ever lose that.
But define what you mean. I think I know what you mean by worldview.
Well, in that, it's a frightening experience to become a statistic, to almost fall off the radar of what people think is important to discuss, and to be talked about in terms that you don't recognise. And I think that something I felt very powerfully after emerging from that situation was people lose their individuality when they are trapped in that kind of poverty. It is a humiliating place to be. And it affects your life in ways that people who have never been there cannot begin to comprehend. Your choices contract. So even someone like me who had a university education, you know, I was an educated person who wanted to work very much. I was really trapped. You know, if you fall beneath a certain level of poverty and without rich relatives, it's very, very difficult to get out of that situation.
And you want us to understand these are real people,
yeah,
with real lives and generosity,
it's
and
easy.
all these other human qualities
Exactly
everybody
right.
else has.
Exactly right, yeah.
And do you want us to also understand that they feel not only that they don't matter, but that others, perhaps more fortunate, have contempt for them or just don't know them?
Well, I think it's a mixture of both. I think that it's easy to caricature. Now, I would say that this is, I feel this is not a black and white book, in the sense that I do not wish to glamorise every poor character in the book, nor do I. I'm not suggesting that everyone who is living in poverty is heroic, but all I would say is there's probably about the same proportion of unheroic characters living in poverty as there are in other classes.
Right, right.
So certainly there are some very unpleasant people in this book who happen also to be poor, but the action centres around a 16-year-old girl who has grown up in tremendously difficult circumstances. And the question for me is, and the question I hope the reader ponders is she worth saving? Who should be saving her? To what extent is this her fault?
This is Crystal.
Crystal Whedon, exactly, yeah.
Tell me about the story. I want to come back to it because of what you have just said. The casual vacancy has to do with the death of a councilman.
Right. It was a phrase, initially, in my head, I was calling the book Responsible, because the theme is personal responsibility and responsibility in a community sense. But then I found this phrase, which I'd never met before. It is a casual vacancy when someone in occupying a political seat dies, they leave the casual vacancy. And that phrase spoke to me on so many levels, because the characters in this book, all of them, I would say, have a lack or a vacancy in their lives to some extent, and they fill it in different ways.
So it becomes a metaphor for everything.
Exactly, yeah.
We've mentioned teenagers several times.
Yep.
Same thing is true with Harry Potter. What is it about teenagers?
I don't know. Do you think it's arrested development
in
me? I don't know.
Well, I do know that you said that your teenage years were not that happy for you.
I love, Stephen King said, if you enjoyed being a teenager, there's something really wrong with you. And that really struck me here. I mean,
So a happy teenager could not write a book like this?
No.
Or like Stephen King?
No, definitely not.
Well,
actually, I think the urge to write often comes from a wish to rearrange reality, the reality you're in. So I don't think I've ever met a writer.
But is it easy to make it a fantasy or to make it a real village that has real people?
To me, there's honestly not much difference. There's truly not much difference, and they're very different kinds of book. But for me, what obsesses me? Morality, mortality. That was
those two things most of all.
Absolutely.
They run through everything you do.
They ran through Harry Potter completely. They run through this. I probably will never be able to.
Mortality and morality.
Very close friend of mine. I finished the book, and the first thing he said to me was, "How many people die?" He knows me so well.
Because he knows you.
Yeah, exactly. But no, to go back to the teenagers point you raise, I think that I am fascinated by people who are on the cusp of adulthood. It's such an interesting time of life. I think most of us would say that it's another very formative period in everyone's life.
It's rebellion,
isn't it?
it's
Absolutely.
unformed.
But you're also very vulnerable, and these characters are vulnerable in their different ways.
And looking for identification.
Absolutely. But also, which is an interesting thing about adolescence is often much more concerned with the big issues of life than the people in middle age, like me, who are struggling with the minutiae of everyday life. We all get bogged down in that to an extent.
They are concerned with the essence of life, which is relationships and love and fear and hope.
Well, it's one teenage boy asks another in this book, what matters? And the answer is sex and death. And then, as an afterthought, music. Now, none of the adult characters are having that conversation. This is not...
Because they're worried about
they're worried about paying the bills. And you know what? They're right to worry about the paying the bills. We all do.
But here's what's amazing. You were worrying about paying the bills, yet at the same time you were writing about, the fantasy of teenagers and everything else. I mean, you were doing both of those at the same time. You had to be an adult and worry about paying the bills. At the same time, you had to be deeply inside of a life in which they're not worrying about it. They're only thinking about...
Well, I think to be an
imagined world of which sex, relationships...
Yes, completely, yeah. I mean, that's the life of a writer, isn't it? I mean, I have to have for want of a better term, a real life and look after my kids, and then I have this other life, as all writers do, where I'm somewhere else completely.
You want us to look for what happens to Crystal and who is she in this book?
Yes, definitely, yes, yeah.
And how do we find her?
Well, I think that people reading the book have had varying reactions to her. I think that if someone were to read this book and say that they couldn't find any redeeming quality in Crystal and they didn't ultimately feel she was worth saving, then I might not have anything to say to that person. I mean,
They have missed it.
I would suggest yes, yeah.
What do you think her redeeming qualities are?
She has aspirations. She has grown up in a household where...
She has dreams.
She's grown up in a household where there is no aspiration. No one has given her a model in how to succeed or how to live a different life. And yet, Crystal has this latent desire to succeed, to achieve. She wants to hold her family together. She's parenting her younger brother, who is being quite egregiously neglected by their biological mother. So I think there's a lot in Crystal to love. At the same time, she's promiscuous, she's foul-mouthed, she's pretty ignorant, she's intermittently violent. So I'm not glorifying Crystal. You know, this isn't Oliver Twist, someone who's walked unscathed through hardship and come out the other side.
And how much of her is you?
Well, I think it's kind of scary when applied to me, because I created something of 200 and something characters in the Potter books, but they say that every character is every writer.
But is it beyond that for Crystal?
No, I wouldn't say that Crystal is based on...
If she drives this story,
she does drive the story.
Does she have to be in part you or somebody you've known?
No one in this book has a living model, but at the same time I have known people like everyone in this book. Yeah, exactly. Crystal is... I went to a school not unlike the school represented in this book, and I certainly knew girls like Crystal. In the plural, there's no one single girl. And I also taught for a while after, as I said earlier, I was teaching. And again, I was teaching in state schools where you had a very mixed intake. And again, I met people whose backgrounds were not dissimilar to Crystal and whose behaviour was not dissimilar to Crystal. So
this is the smallest...
she's rooted in reality.
Packford is the smallest microcosm of government here, the
Exactly
City
right.
Council.
Yeah.
Is that important to know?
I think it is. I mean, a parish council in the UK is the tiniest building block of democracy,
Right.
and I would say that in writing about it, I became really impressed. You know what? It's easy to satirise small town concerns, but what I emerged with was the knowledge of how much their decisions, which may seem relatively small, can have a huge, meaningful impact on other people's lives. I mean, I'm really pro. It's very easy to denigrate the political process, and it's very easy to sneer at politicians, and I've done it myself.
Sure.
But there's no other way to get stuff done, and a lot of people, and in this book you see a great array of motivations for becoming a councillor, but the guy who died on page 2 or 3, he was in it for the right reasons. This is someone who had left a background not quite as bad as Crystal's, but it hadn't been great, and he'd been very poor, and he wants to make a difference, and he sees that as a valid way of making a difference. Have a voice and give people who don't have a voice a voice.
Suppose you were the same woman writing Harry Potter, and you are, but you are $1 billion later, with no serious worries. You were less hungry, and you have said you didn't have to write this book.
No.
You didn't need to write another book.
No, that means, yeah.
You may have needed it for your own psyche,
Yeah,
but you
exactly,
didn't need
that's
it to make money. You
that's
didn't
right.
need it for reputation. You didn't need it for legacy. Would it have been different if you did need it in the same way you needed Harry Potter?
Would I have written a different book,
Yeah.
do you mean? Well, I think that's a really fascinating question. I don't think so. I don't think so. I think I would have written this book just the same.
And
but
is it a better book, in fact, because you have had this whole journey and migration from being poor, starting in middle class with good schools, then poor, then enormously rich? Do you understand class better than most people because you've been everywhere?
Possibly.
Possibly, yes.
Yeah, possibly.
And so what do you know about it? That we all are alike in so many ways?
Yes, completely. I mean,
We're all jealous, and we all have rage, and we all worry, and we all worry about morality and mortality and sickness.
A Sikh hero is quoted in this book. As you know, there's a Sikh family is important in the book, one of the families who is very crucial to the plot. And the Sikh hero he said, and it's just the most beautiful thing, he treated foe and friend alike on the battlefield, and when asked why he was giving aid to any wounded soldier, not just his side, he replied, "I can't differentiate between them. The light of God shines from every soul." Now that to me is the most beautiful, poetic way of expressing a common humanity.
Well, it's interesting, and this is far from this book, but Bill Gates, in terms of giving away all the billions that he has given away and focusing on global health and poverty and disease, says that it springs from a sense that all human life has value.
Right. No, I would totally agree with that. I mean, you talk about the journey and understanding those different points of view. I mean, I am exactly the same person I was then when I was struggling to write Harry Potter and I had no publishing deal and didn't know whether it would ever be published. And my need to write is completely unchanged, so some things don't change at all. Other things change hugely, primarily the way you're viewed by other people.
You care about that at this stage?
No, it's not that. It's not that I care about that or worry about that, but that's the big difference.
Right.
That's the big difference.
Yeah.
Suddenly people...
How they see you is different.
Suddenly people are interested in what you've got to say.
Exactly.
And no one gave a damn what I had to say at a time when...
You're the same person.
I'm the same person, and I pretty much would say the same things now, but now people want to hear it. And that can be disconcerting, though.
Yeah.
It can be disconcerting to have that interest.
Do you ever say to yourself, am I that interesting?
I don't give that many interviews because, to be honest, I just get sick of the sound of my own voice. I just think I just don't have enough opinions to fill. I don't know. It's you work in a hungry medium, you know,
yes.
and I find it, sometimes quite intimidating.
it's a larger point. I mean, is writing what it is that
Yes.
you are happiest when you are
Listen,
in search of a character and where that character is going to take you?
you know when I'm happiest is when I'm about 2/3 of the way through a book, and always at that point I'm flying. Always I'm flying, and I'm just, that is the place I live to be. 2/3, wake up in the morning, I'm about 2/3 of the way through, I know exactly where I'm going, and I've got the whole day to write. That to me is a perfect day.
And do you try to perfect each sentence, or do you want to...
Yeah, it doesn't always work out that way, but yeah, you're always hoping to.
Yeah, but I've been told that the books you turn into your editors are pretty much the books that get published, that you don't require a lot of editing.
Well, that's kind. I look back at some of the Potter books, and I itch to go back with a red pen and cross out some adverbs.
But that's self-editing.
Yeah,
it's not
absolutely.
so much that somebody else has edited
Well,
you.
with this book, no, there wasn't a. Well,
Yeah.
I've got a great editor, David Shelley, and he is that perfect person who is like a coach, you know, who knows how to get the best out of you. So he was fantastic. So no, I don't think we changed a great deal. He's just got a phenomenal understanding of what he had on this book. He had a phenomenal understanding of what I was trying to do, and there were places where he said, "That's great, but you need to do more of that there."
Yeah.
Or it's just fine-tuning, and he was just phenomenal. He had a great understanding of what I wanted to do and was on my side. Because, you know, when we went, it's always nerve-wracking turning in a manuscript.
People now make these kinds of comparisons, Dickens and Trollope and Eliot and that kind of thing. My point is not do you think of yourself as any of those, but my point is what kind of acknowledgement and appreciation would satisfy you the most?
Oh, my God.
Because you...
I think it's very dangerous for a writer to start thinking in those terms. I think, I really mean that. I'm not, this isn't false modesty or, I mean,
No, you
I'm
don't seem like a person who would have false modesty.
but I'm enormously flattered that anyone would mention those names anywhere near me. But
I know.
I will say, I consciously wanted this book to be a modern take on that kind of 19th century novel where you do go into a small society and you really analyse and anatomise that tiny society. So that's great that people would say, you know, they would recognise that I'm trying to write in that tradition.
Right,
but there's a difference between that and me sitting there thinking, now, who would I like to be compared to?
That's why I asked the question the way I did. I didn't want you to think that I was thinking
No, I get
do you
that.
think if you're,
so what
do you...
I think it's probably...
Do you, rich woman, think of yourself as Dickens? That kind of thing. I'm not
No, I really get that. I think it's,
well,
and I think it's a fair question. But I also think that I do genuinely think that if you are sitting there thinking, now, whom would I most like to be compared to? You're wasting your time. Just get on and work.
Yeah.
Do the work.
Yeah. But who are you writing for?
My ideal reader has an open mind and loves character, I suppose.
But do you see it, when you're writing, do you see it like a movie? Do you see this, I mean, pretty soon, I assume, after Harry Potter, you saw the character as exactly the movie character for Harry Potter. I mean,
Interesting. No.
Interesting?
No, I didn't.
You never thought of him as...
With one exception, that this is what's interesting to me. I never saw Dan or Rupert or Emma as my... No, because I'd lived with them so long, I saw my characters in my head. There was one exception, and I have said this before. Ivana Lynch, who played Luna Lovegood, I saw her.
We both believe you, by the way. That he who must not be named is back, and you fought him, and the Ministry and the Prophet are conspiring against you and Dumbledore.
Thanks. Seems you're about the only ones that do.
I don't think that's true. But I suppose that's how he wants you to feel.
What do you mean?
Well, if I were you-know-who, I'd want you to feel cut off from everyone else. Because if it's just you alone, you're not as much of a threat.
That was such a perfect... I mean, I'm not saying the others weren't perfect pieces of casting, because I adore those people.
But here's a question to say,
but
how did
she
Harry...
got in my head, and it was... I even heard her voice when I was writing Luna.
But how did Harry differ from the actor in this case. I mean, how did the picture you have in your head differ from the picture we see on the screen?
Dan Rupert and Emma, and they know I've said this to them, they're much better looking than the kids I saw in my own head. Yeah, definitely. I mean, Emma is beautiful, staggeringly beautiful. But the thing so
you didn't see that kind of
no, in the book, Hermione is, she's a plain Jane, although she sorts herself out a little bit and she gets a little more styled as she gets older. But what Emma had, which made her, which I am so glad they cast her as Hermione, Emma is a very intelligent girl who played intelligent beautifully. Emma's not at all, even though she's stunningly beautiful, Emma is not at all about her looks. You know, that's who Emma is. And that shone through in her portrayal of Hermione, and that's why I was thrilled they cast her, because she was such a smart, bright girl. And I needed my Hermione to be that kind of person.
It's just how I remember it. The trees, the river, everything. Like nothing's changed. Not true, of course, everything's changed. If I brought my parents back here now, they probably wouldn't recognise any of it. Not the trees, not the river, not even me. Maybe we should just stay here, Harry. Grow old.
Did the movies teach you anything about your characters? Did you see anything about your characters that might have added to their complexity? Because actors can take lines.
Yeah, definitely. And make
that's
them
their job,
own,
is to make them, enhance them.
Gary Oldman was fantastic.
Oh, I love
Sirius.
him,
He was amazing. And he gave Sirius something that was in my mind for Sirius, but on screen, I really saw it, that slight edge of insanity, of being unbalanced, someone who'd been locked up for a long time. And he just played that.
Now listen to me. I want you to take the others and get out of here. What? No, I'm staying with you. You've done beautifully. Now let me take it from here.
When you're writing this with the multiple characters you have, is finding somebody that's a bit crazed, is that like thrilling? Because you can do so many things with a bad person.
You've got to rein it in, though. You've got to just pitch it right.
Yeah.
Well, because otherwise it just becomes like a cardboard and paste caricature. You've still got to find the centre of the crazy person. Bellatrix in the books is probably the most out of control, insane person in the books. She's vicious, even more than Voldemort, who has a control about him. But that was how I saw her, that she was... there was a kind of a lack of boundaries in her.
Yeah. Does literary merit matter?
In generally speaking? Or...
No, for what you write. I mean, will you be bothered by reviews that are not as kind as others? Even though they are reputable people, does it matter?
No, that should
Does it
happen.
matter because, you know, it can't affect your life or your psyche?
There are two things I would say to that. First of all, it is one of the amazing and wonderful things about literature, as about film and music, is it's utterly subjective. So...
It's somebody's
opinion. That's the point of it, you know, that's the point. Of course, you move in that world, if you expect to just stand under a shower of perpetual praise, there's something wrong with you.
Exactly right.
That, you know, you will get criticism. I knew that going in, and the funny thing is, I'm not a particularly... I was never a very confident person. In there are areas in my life in which I'm very thin-skinned. But not in this area. In this area, I think it's right and proper. I should be criticised, and that's
And can
literature.
you learn from it?
Yeah, sometimes, absolutely. It depends. I mean, there have been reviews that I've thought, yeah, that's fair comment, and I need to take that on board.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, of course.
So where are you thin-skinned?
I was back to adolescent. Yeah. I was a very self-conscious adolescent, and I was... Oh, God, about everything, you know. And that followed me into adulthood, and I've had to learn to be a little more grown up.
Are there any insecurities left after this?
Yeah, loads of them, but I'm not showing them on TV.
Well, give me an example of the kind of thing you're talking about. What could you be insecure about? You've got a great marriage to a wonderful doctor,
I do.
you know.
Absolutely.
Jessica's doing just fine, thank you very much. Yes?
But I'm a human being like
Your mother
anyone
is a-
else, and we all have our insecurities, and we all have places where we feel we could do better.
But is it about something other than mortality and morality? Or vanity?
Listen, all of those things are in all of us. We all worry about those things, and I'm not immune.
Yeah. Do you have anything that you want to prove now? I mean,
I
I
want...
mean, this was an effort to say, I can go somewhere else and tell different kinds of stories. Because in the end, I'm a storyteller. That's what I do.
Yeah, fundamentally, that was what I wanted to write next,
Yeah.
so I wrote it.
Yeah.
And I knew perfectly well that some people wouldn't love it, but that's okay. That's okay. That's how it should be. And indeed, with a book like this, if some people didn't hate it, I'd have written it wrong.
Yeah, exactly. In other words,
You
well,
can't
not only
please
that, you
all the
wouldn't have-
people
It
all the
means you wouldn't
time.
have taken risks. That's the other
Exactly,
thing.
exactly.
No risk
Spot
taken
on.
here.
Exactly.
Exactly. So what kind of role do you want to have, you know, as the member of the community you're now part of, this larger community, and you and the Queen and
Me and the Queen.
Olympics and you know all of that. I mean, you are a public
The Olympics
person
was
now.
amazing.
I know.
Amazing, incredible.
Because
Because Danny Boyle, who
produced it.
produced it, exactly, he asked me to do it
Who
twice.
could have known? I thought of him as a filmmaker.
He was amazing.
Yeah.
He was amazing. I mean, he was like a general. There were so many thousands of people
yeah.
involved in that.
Well, that's what directors do.
Yeah, well, I'd never seen such a graphic demonstration of the skill set you need. But so he persuaded me. I said no a couple of times. I was terrified.
How did he persuade you?
Well, we had a meeting, a face-to-face meeting, and my husband was there also. And he told me everything that was going to happen, including the Queen jumping out of the plane. And after he told me the Queen jumping out of the plane, I thought, no one's even going to remember I was there. So that really brought down my anxiety level. I understood I was going to be a small cog in an amazing machine, and I thought, I will be very proud to be part of this, and I should do it. It was terrifying. It was terrifying.
Which part was terrifying?
80,000 people in the crowd walking out there, and then the knowledge, which I was trying very hard to block out, of how many people were watching on TV. And for someone who used to be phobic about public speaking, this was, you know, this was quite a big deal.
But you're so relaxed here in this conversation. I mean,
This is it, but this is easy. This just feels like you and me sitting at a table. So it's very easy for me to...
Yeah, it's that kind of table.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is easy. But so when you think about the future in terms of, I mean, you don't have much to prove other than to continue doing, which brings you great joy. What's the satisfaction of writing for you? Other than it's what you do. Like, this is what I do.
I wish I knew the answer to that, because, but it is what I do, and it's so fundamental, and I have such a powerful need to write.
Need?
Yeah,
If
it's
you
a
didn't
need.
do it, you would be
I think I would be very
miserable.
mentally ill.
mentally ill.
Yeah, maybe. I remember when years ago, I read for the first time that Virginia Woolf had been told she mustn't write, you know.
Yeah.
She was... And I can remember feeling like that was horrific. How could they have banned her? How could they have stopped her writing? Because that to me would be... I can't tell you how serious that would be to me. But why? I'm not quite sure. What is it?
Well, it
Why
means
is-
it gives definition.
Does
Does
have
it
this-
give you identity and definition and all
I
that?
suppose I have a real need to go and create a different world in my head. I just do. I'm driven to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And was that why Harry Potter was what it was? Because
Yeah,
you
I
needed to
think
create
so.
another world.
Yeah, and then I brought all the problems from this world into that
Yeah.
world too. But it was a great way of examining those problems, to do it in that parallel, seemingly more, seemingly safer place. And it wasn't really safer at all.
You described the great joy of being 2/3 in and you know where it's
Yeah.
going, and you're really on a high then.
Yeah.
Are you on a high when you get the idea, as you did on the train, as you did
Yeah.
on the plane, and you
Yeah.
knew this is where... And do you know it? I mean,
Yeah, because I always know when I've had a decent idea, and this has never let me down, because I get this physical response, like this rush of adrenaline. It's really physical. That's how I sort what I think are the good ideas from the bad ideas.
Do you have another idea now that thrills you and excites you?
I do. I know what I'm pretty sure what my next 2 books will be. So, yeah.
They are?
Well, one's for kids and one's for adults. And I am excited about both of them, so that's...
Well, do you mix them up? I mean, can you write two of them at the same time?
Not
Can you go
not
here and
exactly.
then go there?
Not exactly, but I have got 2 notebooks with me on this trip, one for each book, and I'm jotting in both.
Okay,
but that's notebooks. I'm not really writing. I'm just,
but,
you know,
but
it's
are you
ideas and
also
so
a constant by nature of where you are and what you've done and what you can do? Have you become a finely tuned observer of human nature?
I think I always
That was their period. That's how you did what you did.
I'm fascinated by people, and that is at the heart of absolutely everything I've written. Because I would say, I do firmly
But you didn't learn
believe...
that at school, did you?
No, I don't think... I think you just are that way,
Yeah,
aren't
right.
you?
I was curious at 5.
I was just very interested in people, and I do think that I've so often been asked, what was it about Harry Potter that, you know, captivated people?
Yeah.
And the magic was fun, but it was ultimately, it was the characters that kept people coming back. It was the people.
How do you write? Do you get up in the morning early? Do you go make
My
coffee and
best
then
work,
sit down?
particularly late 40s, believe you me, the best work's done early morning. I used
yes,
to...
I know that. that's why.
Oh,
That's exactly. I just
Earlier, you
yeah,
know, when
right.
I was in my 20s, I could and did sit up all night, but those days are gone. It's
Yes.
really best to get up early,
Yeah.
and I find that the morning
Like early
is
means what?
Well, my husband needs to be
crack
up
of-
at 6:30 to get to work,
right.
and the kids need to be up early to get off to school. So once they've gone and the house is empty, then I would start working. Yeah, then I'd get another coffee and start working, and that's the ideal writing time, those hours in the morning.
And how long?
Well, I can write a lot of hours in the day. I mean, I've done 8-hour days comfortably recently. But
And are you disappointed? I mean, every day that you sit down for 8 hours a day, you have something on the page.
yeah, definitely.
You don't go days in which you're just...
No.
But there was, in writing this, I mean, there have been times, both in Harry Potter and this, where the struggle gave you not writer's block, but something, right? Aren't there been times in which you said, the stress of the expectation, you
Not
just
with
wanted
this.
to leave it?
Not with this.
Okay.
I tell you,
But how long did it take you to write this? 5 years?
yeah, but I was writing other stuff at the same time.
Like what?
Well, like I'm talking the other 2 books,
Oh,
you
the
know.
other 2 books.
So there's other stuff been going on in those 5 years. I wasn't working on Casual Vacancy from beginning to end of
Why
those
not?
5 years because that's just I've never worked that way. I've always had other things going
Were
on.
you skipping ahead on? Were you writing 7 on Harry Potter when you should have been writing 4?
I wrote a substantial part of another children's book midway through Potter
Yeah.
that I still need to go back and finish because I really like it. But I've always jumped around. I need to have several
But
things on the go.
you have had at times in which you really need to pull yourself away from it, haven't you?
I had
The
in
stress of
never with
expectation
that.
of- No, okay, but with Harry
I had
Potter.
a break between Goblet and Phoenix.
And what was
where
that about?
It was about total. I said to the publishers, I can't give you another book next year. I'd done one a year for 4 years. And it was simply...
Broke their heart, didn't it?
Yeah, but then they got a huge book. I got a huge book for their pains. I just said to them, I need to step away. I need to recharge my batteries. And it wasn't that I didn't want to write, but I needed to step away a little. And then that I was going to take 2 years to do the next book, and I took 3. And in those 2 years, I met my husband, married my husband, had a baby. I wasn't expecting all of that to come out of taking a break.
Right. But I'm also interested in the creative process, too. And I've come to understand, first of all, there's no spirit from on high that speaks to you. What speaks to you, you know, is a idea that you can then dive into and then make choices. You make choices about your characters. You make choices about do they do this or do they do that?
Yeah.
You know, and that's what the creative idea is about.
You're right. I find that people are very interested in the concept of inspiration,
Right.
and that it exists for sure. I mean, the ideas for both The Casual Vacancy and Harry Potter and some other things that I am writing fell into my head.
Yeah.
And where they came from, you know, you can tell yourself, okay, it came from somewhere in my subconscious, but it feels like someone dropped it into your head, and that's a wonderful feeling. But a girl asked me at the launch of The Casual Vacancy in London, she said to me, do you write only when you're inspired? And I said, no, because I would have written a page and a half.
Exactly.
You know, and I said to her, you've got to, I mean, it's people some people don't want to hear that about writing. You're not sitting there taking dictation from from an angel.
Exactly.
You've got to work. It's
well
about
said.
structure. It's about discipline. It's all these deadly things that your school teacher told you needed. You need it. Yeah.
I mean, what sort of, you never know where you get good ideas.
No.
I mean, you don't sit there and say, give me a good idea.
You can't think yourself into that.
Exactly
but you can think, you can work yourself into being inspired. I mean, I have sat in front of the blank page. I remember chapter 13, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. The number of times I rewrote that damn chapter.
Because?
It was just technically very difficult because I needed to show something without showing it. I needed to, I think it's chapter 13. I'm pretty sure it is.
If you don't know, I don't know who does.
There was a... There are people out there watching this now. How can you not? How can you not know? I can recite that chapter verbatim. I'm so humiliated.
Exactly right. They can. You're right.
Anyway, but it was technically very difficult to convey the information I needed to convey while hiding certain things. And God knows how often I rewrote it and rewrote it. But the reality is, it's like a scientist. Everything that fails brings you closer to what works.
Your mom. You know, I mean, how? All of us have this instinct. God, I wish my mom or my dad was here to hear this story, to share this joy, to see this, because we all want to say,
look what I did.
Look what I did. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's a very complex question for me, that, because, I mean, what wouldn't I give to have my mother see what happened?
Oh, yeah.
And it would have meant so much to her. I mean, she was such a reader and valued books and literature very, very highly, and the house was full of books because of my mother. So on that level, I mean, the human, the most personal level, as I say, what wouldn't I give? What's crazy about the situation is that if she hadn't died, the books wouldn't have been what they are. So I get caught into one of those horrible sort of time loops. Also, if my mother hadn't died, I would never have gone to teach abroad, because while she was alive and unwell, I wouldn't have left the country. If I hadn't gone to live and teach in Portugal, I never would have met my ex-husband. I wouldn't have one of the most important people ever in my life, obviously my oldest daughter. So it's, you know, life throws you these terrible, terrible things that seem so atrocious and so appalling, and yet somehow we do get through them. We do. And then you look back and think, wow, but I got given my daughter, that wouldn't have happened. And as I say, her death infuses the whole Harry Potter series, because everything became a little darker and deeper after she died. I'd been writing for 6 months before she died, and then I got to experience what Harry experienced. You know, I lost one of the people who meant most to me in the whole world. And as I say, the books would be very different if she'd lived.
What would you say to her?
I would say,
look what you did.
Well,
you
yes.
know, you could say, but
look what happened.
In living and in dying, you have given me.
Yeah, well, exactly. Exactly. I mean, I'm very grateful that I had her till 25. It wasn't long enough.
And you now try to provide some research funds for people to somehow come to a greater understanding of
multiple sclerosis.
To multiple sclerosis.
I mean, she died from complications to do with her multiple sclerosis. Multiple sclerosis doesn't kill people,
no.
but the complications resulting from the disease may. And she was very unlucky. She had a very severe form of the disease. One thing I've learnt over the years that I've been involved with research is, and it's part of what's so strange and something we need to understand about the disease, is how variable its course can be. So I really wouldn't want anyone newly diagnosed to watch this and think, oh my God, what's going to happen? Because some people, I've met people, you know, since becoming involved in research who are doing just fine. And then there are other people like my mother.
They're making remarkable progress. We have done programs at this table with eminent scientists.
And it is a fabulous, I mean, there's never a great time to be diagnosed, but there's never been a better time for people with multiple sclerosis. You know, there are treatment options out there now, and there's some great research out there, and alternatives, lots of alternatives for people.
How about your father?
Well, I've discussed this. We don't really have a relationship. Yeah.
Was it 2003, was it, or?
I know it's been pretty much a decade, so yeah, it must have been. Yeah.
Why?
Well, I have an aversion to I mean, I don't want to speak for anyone but me.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to...
So from you?
Because sometimes I think a relationship is so difficult that that happens, and I don't say that lightly. Obviously that's a very big deal, but equally I'm not ashamed to say that I made a decision that I don't regret, and that's where we were. But I don't want to go into really personal stuff, because I do genuinely feel it's unfair when the other person isn't here to have their say.
There's also this about you, which I found fascinating. When we had a conversation in the morning over at CBS, there were people lined up to see you.
Right.
And that has, I was just struck by how meaningful that is to you.
Of course.
I mean, they want to go and buy this book, and they want to go and stand outside half the night to see you because of what the book has meant to them.
It's because of what the book means to them. And how can...
Just to touch the person that said something that...
Well, how as a writer couldn't you be incredibly touched by that? I have a particular feeling for people, and many of these people now, of course, are in their early 20s, the people who grew up with Harry. So I think that my books occupied a special place in their lives. They grew up with Harry year on year, and now I'm meeting young adults who had that experience, and that's incredibly moving to meet people of that age who are standing there in front of you saying things like, or telling you what you meant in their childhood. I mean, I can't imagine anyone wouldn't be phenomenally moved by that. It's wonderful.
And before we leave you this evening, this montage of the Harry Potter films, one of the highest grossing combination of films in the history of movies.
You've made a mistake. I mean, I can't be a wizard. I mean, I'm just Harry. Just Harry.
Welcome to Hogwarts. Now, in a few moments you will pass through these doors and join your classmates, but before you can take your seats, you must be sorted into your houses. They are Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. Now, while you're here, your house will be like your family. Your triumphs will earn you points. Any rule breaking, and you will lose points.
What's that? The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware. It's written in blood.
Tell them Hogwarts is no longer safe. It is as we feared, Minerva. The Chamber of Secrets has indeed been opened again.
Da, 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 da. Isn't he beautiful? Say hello to Buckbeak.
Hagrid, exactly what is that?
We now have our 3 champions. But in the end, only one will go down in history. Only one will hoist this chalice of champions, this vessel of victory, the Triwizard Cup.
He really is out there, isn't he? We've got to be able to defend ourselves. And if Umbridge refuses to teach us how, we need someone who will.
You must obey every command I give you without question.
Yes, sir.
You do understand what I'm saying? Should I tell you to hide, you hide. Should I tell you to run, you run. Avada Kedavra.
Stupid elf! You could have killed me!
Dobby never meant to kill. Dobby only meant to maim or seriously injure.
Harry Potter,
is dead. From this day forth, you put your faith in me.
All your characters right there.
Mm-hmm.
Take a look at this. This is what people have said to me about you and about the series on this program, Roll Tape.
Tell me who Harry Potter is and why it is so phenomenally successful.
I think it taps into the basic idea. Look, I look at myself as a kid when I was growing up in Ohio, when I was 11 years old. I would have given anything to get a letter from Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry saying, you know, I'm going to take you out of this dreary existence.
Exactly.
I'm going to let you escape from this life. Basically, at its heart, these books give people a sense of hope. And you can be 8 years old and feel that. You can be 10 or 11, particularly for kids. It gives them a sense of empowerment, of hope, saying, you can do something different with your life.
She's a very easy person to edit because she knows what she's doing. And she's very confident. And those are the easiest kinds of people to work with because you can give her any kind of feedback and you don't have to worry that she's going to be distressed by it or thrown by it. She knows what she wants, and if I just tell her how I react, she knows what to do with it.
There's also something extra, you know, beyond the themes that it speaks to. It's just a divine piece of writing, that's all.
Divine piece of writing.
She's a great writer. I hope she writes something, a whole other kind of thing after this so that people believe this. When the last book came out, you had me on for it, and do you remember this? You showed a clip of Harold Bloom saying how terrible these books were, and he hadn't read any except the first one. She is really an extraordinary writer. I remember that.
Tell me what the essence of the books is.
Well, that's the books in general. I think that part of the success of what J.K. Rowling did is that she crafted this adventure, but thematically she dealt with the themes and the characters from an archetype kind of standpoint. So like fairy tales and fables, and then they connect directly into human consciousness.
Yeah.
Obviously it's not a realistic kind of universe, but the emotions are very real. The emotions are very human, even if they are wizards.
How do you explain this phenomenon?
It beats me. The only thing I can say is that it connects directly to, and I'm saying this because it transcends any culture.
Right.
I mean, Harry Potter is as big in Japan as it is in England or in America.
Yeah.
So I can only assume that it's because it carries such a universal energy that people relate to that.
There it is.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you for joining us. See you next time.